The phantom hitchhiker. It was a foggy night along a desolate stretch of highway in the American Midwest. John, a seasoned trucker with over 20 years of experience, was driving his rig through the dense mist. He had heard the legends of the phantom hitchhiker, but had always dismissed them as mere tales told by bored truckers to pass the time. As he drove, the outline of a figure began to appear through the fog on the side of the road. John squinted, trying to make out what he was seeing. It was a young woman, her clothes tattered and her face pale. She was thumbing a ride. Against his better judgment, John pulled over and let her in. The woman sat silently in the passenger seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. John tried to make small talk, but she simply stared straight ahead, her eyes wide and unblinking. After several minutes of eerie silence, she whispered, "Take me home." John asked for her address, and she responded with a location just off the highway. When they arrived, the woman exited the truck without a word and walked up to a dilapidated farmhouse. John watched her until she disappeared inside. Feeling uneasy, he drove away, but something gnawed at him. He had to know more. The next day, John returned to the farmhouse. An old man answered the door. John described the woman he had picked up, and the man's face turned ashen. "That was my daughter," he said in a trembling voice. "She died 20 years ago, killed by a hit-and-run driver while hitchhiking on this road." John left, his blood running cold. He never drove that stretch of highway again. The rest stop stalker Mike, a long-haul trucker, had a habit of stopping at a particular rest area along a quiet interstate. It was out of the way, seldom used, and gave him a sense of peace. However, one night, as he settled in for some sleep, he noticed a car pull up beside his rig. The driver never got out, and the engine stayed running. After an hour, the car was still there, its headlights illuminating the darkness. Mike felt uneasy but tried to ignore it. However, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. He peered out the window but saw nothing unusual. Suddenly, he heard a tapping on the window. Startled, he looked over to see a man's face pressed against the glass, grinning widely. His eyes were wide, and his breath fogged up the window. Mike reached for his phone to call the police, but the man disappeared into the darkness before he could make the call. The police arrived and searched the area but found no trace of the man or his car. Mike was shaken but continued on his route. However, he began to notice the same car following him on different stretches of the road, always keeping a distance. It was as if the driver was taunting him, waiting for the right moment to strike. Mike eventually quit trucking, unable to shake the fear that the man might one day catch up with him. The haunted CB radio. Sam was a new trucker, excited about the open road and the freedom it offered. He had just installed a brand new CB radio in his rig, eager to connect with other truckers and listen to their stories. However, one night, he started receiving strange transmissions. The voice on the other end was distorted, almost like a whisper, and it repeated the same phrase over and over. "Help me, please help me." Sam tried to respond, but there was no reply. The voice continued, growing more desperate with each repetition. Sam pulled over, thinking maybe it was another trucker in trouble. He called out on the radio, but there was only static. Suddenly, the voice returned, this time louder and more frantic. "I'm trapped. They're coming, please help." Panicked, Sam tried to pinpoint the source of the transmission, but it was impossible. The voice began to scream, a blood-curdling sound. That made Sam's hair stand on end. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the transmission stopped. Shaken, Sam continued his route, but the voice haunted him. He later learned that a trucker had died on that stretch of road years ago, trapped in his rig after a crash. Some say his spirit still haunts the highway, desperately calling for help on the CB radio. The black dog. There's an old superstition among truckers about the black dog. It's said that if you see a large, shadowy black dog on the side of the road, it's a sign that death is near. Tom had heard the stories but never believed them. That changed one night when he was driving through the mountains. It was late, and Tom was tired. He considered pulling over but decided to push through to the next town. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it, a massive black dog, its eyes glowing in the dark. It was standing on the side of the road, staring directly at him. Tom swerved to avoid it, nearly losing control of his truck. Shaken, he pulled over and looked back, but the dog was gone. He decided to call it a night and parked at the nearest rest stop. The next morning, he heard on the news that a trucker had died on that stretch of road, losing control and plunging down a ravine. Tom couldn't shake the feeling that the black dog had been a warning, and he vowed never to ignore such signs again. John couldn't shake the encounter with the phantom hitchhiker. The image of the young woman's pale face and the old man's tragic story haunted him day and night. He started researching local legends and discovered that many truckers had reported seeing the same woman over the years. Some had even claimed she spoke to them, warning them of impending danger or asking for help before vanishing without a trace. John's obsession grew. He began driving that stretch of highway again, night after night, hoping to see her once more. Weeks turned into months, and his once steady life fell apart. His wife left him, and he lost his job after missing too many deliveries. But he didn't care. He was determined to solve the mystery. One foggy night, just like the first time, the outline of the woman appeared again on the side of the road. John's heart raced as he pulled over. She got in, and without saying a word, she handed him a small, faded photograph. It was a picture of her as a child, with a date written on the back, the day she died. Before he could say anything, she whispered, "You can help me." John asked how, desperate to know what she meant, but she simply pointed ahead, towards the road, and said, "Don't stop." John drove on, and as the miles passed, the fog grew thicker, until it was almost impossible to see. Suddenly, a blinding light appeared in the middle of the road, a car speeding towards them. John swerved just in time, narrowly avoiding a head-on collision. When he looked over, the woman was gone, but the photograph remained on the seat. John realized that she wasn't seeking revenge or closure, she was protecting others from suffering the same fate she had. With newfound purpose, John returned to the road, not out of obsession, but as a guardian, warning others of the dangers ahead. The rest stop stalker continued. Mike couldn't escape the feeling that the man in the car was following him. Even after he quit trucking, the paranoia lingered. Every time he saw a car pull up behind him, his heart raced. He moved to a different state, changed his phone number, and even grew a beard in hopes of becoming unrecognizable. But the fear never left him. One night, as he was walking to his apartment from a late shift at a local warehouse, he noticed a car idling across the street. His blood ran cold when he recognized the car's silhouette. It was the same model that had followed him all those years ago. Mike rushed inside and locked the door, but the phone rang almost immediately. Trembling, he answered, only to hear the same eerie breathing that had fogged up his truck window. The voice on the other end whispered, "You can't hide." Terrified, Mike knew he had to confront his stalker once and for all. The next night, he parked his car at a secluded spot and waited, keeping a tire iron at his side. Hours passed before the familiar car pulled up. The man stepped out, grinning that same unsettling grin, but this time, Mike was ready. A confrontation ensued, but just as Mike was about to strike, the man vanished into thin air, leaving only the echo of his laughter. Mike's tire iron hid nothing but air. Stunned, Mike realized that this wasn't a man at all, but something far more sinister, a malevolent spirit that fed on fear. From that night on, the car and the man never appeared again. Mike was free from his stalker, but he knew that whatever it was still out there, waiting for its next victim. The haunted CB radio continued. Sam couldn't get the voice out of his head. The desperate pleas for help echoed in his mind long after the transmission ended. Determined to find out more, he contacted other truckers who had driven that stretch of road. To his surprise, many had heard the same voice, though few were willing to talk about it. Sam decided to investigate the crash that had supposedly caused the haunting. He found old newspaper clippings detailing a tragic accident. A trucker had lost control of his rig during a storm and crashed into a ravine. The man's body was never recovered, but his CB radio continued to transmit for days after the crash, repeating the same distress call. Sam drove to the site of the crash, hoping to make contact with the spirit. As he approached the spot, his CB radio crackled to life. The voice returned, clearer this time, saying, "I'm here, I'm still here." Sam felt a cold chill run down his spine, but he kept his composure. He spoke into the radio, telling the spirit that he was there to help. The voice responded with gratitude, but it was clear that it was still trapped, unable to move on. Desperate to free the spirit, Sam reached out to a local paranormal investigator. Together, they performed a ritual at the crash site, hoping to release the trucker's soul. As they finished, the CB radio emitted a final, peaceful sigh, and then fell silent. The next day, Sam's CB radio worked as it should, no longer haunted by the desperate cries of the lost trucker. Though he continued his routes, he always carried the memory of the encounter with him. knowing that sometimes, the road holds more than just asphalt and destinations. The black dog continued. Tom couldn't forget the black dog he had seen that night. The experience shook him to his core, but it also made him more cautious on the road. He started paying closer attention to his surroundings, and whenever he felt fatigued, he would pull over to rest, no matter how close he was to his destination. A few weeks later, Tom was driving through a remote desert highway when he spotted something familiar out of the corner of his eye. The black dog was back, running alongside his truck. Its eyes glowed eerily, and this time, Tom didn't hesitate. He pulled over immediately. As he sat in his truck, heart pounding, the dog approached the window and simply stared at him. Tom realized that the dog wasn't just a warning, it was a guide. He decided to follow the dog's lead, driving slowly as the animal trotted ahead of him. The dog led him down a winding, little-used road that eventually opened up into a small town. Tom had never seen the place before, and it wasn't on any of his maps. He pulled into a diner and went inside, only to find that the townsfolk knew all about the black dog. They told him that it had saved countless lives over the years, guiding lost souls to safety. Tom left the town with a newfound respect for the road's mysteries. He knew that the black dog would appear again when it was needed, but now, he no longer feared it. Instead, he saw it as a protector, a silent guardian of those who dared to traverse the lonely highways.